Hello, everyone. My name is Rolands. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nordigen, and yeah, it's very exciting to be on the stage. There's tons of energy after the founders battle. I feel like I'm pitching something here as well, so it feels very good. Yeah, so I'll be talking about something that's like an idea that we have been within our team thinking about, and something that like many other smart people in the world have been looking into of how to automate finance. It's a pretty complicated topic. 15 minutes is how much time I have today to give you just like the top of the iceberg. But what I'd love to showcase is what is possible today through the technologies that we have, and what are the bottlenecks of how we can move faster forward. So for decades, scientists, visionaries, companies have been advertising AI to us. It's been the ultimate solution to many of the tedious problems we have. We've had solutions that can help us get stuff going with boring tasks. It can help us automate things that we don't want to do, and it can just improve our lives in many other places. And lo and behold, we have AI tools in our pockets, which is just fascinating. They're not very smart, but we're getting there. We have tools that can help us set alarms if we want to. There's tools that we can ask them and they can change a song for us. And little by little, I think we're going to evolve into being able to complete more complicated tasks. And one of those tasks is finance. Finance is very complicated. There's lots of things that can go wrong if you have the wrong tool. But there's lots of things that can go right if you have the right tool. To give you like an idea of where we are in terms of the automation, what I love is that there's lots of research that's been done in other fields of study, such as self-driving cars. And there's a group of people, they call the Society of Automotive Engineers, and they have come up with like a really simple framework how to think about self-driving cars. The framework is like 6 levels. Level 0 is you do not have a self-driving car, you drive yourself. Level 1 is you have a car that helps you to steer a bit and helps you with like handling the lanes. You have level 2, which is a Tesla that kind of drives itself, but you still have to keep the wheel. And then recently, 2 companies have acquired level 3, which is Honda and Mercedes. Basically, you have a car that is actually self-driving, and you don't have to, actually drive it yourself, which is great. And we're getting to a point where, level 5 is you do not have to have a steering wheel in a car, and you only have steering wheel because it looks good. What I love about this framework is that it can be applied also to thinking about automating finance. And so if you use that as a metaphor, level 0 would be you do not have anything automated. You have to deal with your own personal finance yourself. You have to log into your online bank. You have to, make payments, figure out what you do with payments you have received, file in the taxes, all those, tasks that we have to do as citizens. And level 1 would be AI, that it gives you advice on how to handle your finances. And level 2 then is AI that actually acts on your behalf, and you have to keep eye on it. And so there's, this has not been documented just yet, but there's, from the tools that we see on the market, it feels like we are somewhere near level 2. It feels like we have the technologies needed to actually have AI make decisions based on some inputs for us, and all we have to do is just pay attention to it. And what I'd love to talk about is, assuming that this is true, what are the bottlenecks for us to actually capture this level 2 and make this go into mainstream, but also like what are the bottlenecks for us to go further into other levels, level 3, level 4, and level 5. One thing that we know for a fact is that it is already possible to use things like Siri and several other AI assistants to do things that are complex or things that require more diligence. And so one of the things that, for example, we did a small test inside of our team where we actually used the built-in tools that sit inside of an iPhone to connect to a bank account, so you can ask Siri to check your bank balance. And that got us thinking, what else can you do with Siri? Like, what else you would love to do with something like that? Well, there's a lot of things. If you look at Siri as something that could be, like a real assistant, well, that's an assistant that has almost infinite computing power and almost infinite access to knowledge. Well, that thing can actually tell you stuff about your bank account that you didn't know. It can tell you stuff about your financial health that you didn't know. And then it can also predict the future and tell you how to react on their prediction of the future in a way that makes your financial health significantly better. And that's a valuable asset to have, and that's a fantastic future to which it makes sense to be thinking about. The drawback, though, is that the tools that we have in our pocket, they're still pretty dumb. There are occasions where they still make very basic errors. So, like, here's an example. Quite recently, there was a tech blogger who found out that when you ask time for London, it's not necessarily you're going to get the answer for the right London, which is, weird, given that it's kind of something that you can hard code if you want to. But this goes to show that context matters a lot. And simple questions, unless they have the right context, can lead to wrong answers. And when you ask someone like Siri for time, and Siri gives you the wrong answer, that's perhaps not convenient, but there's not much damage done. But if you ask Siri to make a payment, and it does something weird with your money, well, that's when things can go really bad. And so this is what we want to avoid. And so the context is actually what makes and breaks AI in a lot of ways. And I'd love to talk about like what actually consists, how you can look into context, and how you can think about adding more context and helping Siri and similar AI assistants have more context. So if you think about, let's say you wanted to ask someone like Siri or like any of the AI assistants, pay my latest phone bill. And the pipeline for how you can think about what is happening within that request is that you tell that system, you make a request, and that luckily we have multiple solutions out there that are thriving for recognizing those requests and digitalizing them. We have Siri, we have Google Assistant, Alexa, Cortana, Bixby. Those things that we're literally available to us, and we can try and test them and use them and build stuff on top of them. And there's smart people working continuously to improve them. So once you have that request coming in, the next thing that is required for Siri is to start gathering that context. And so that's when things like access to data is very important. It has to know something about you in order to understand what to do with this context. And so luckily we have things like open banking. So for those that don't know, open banking is the ability to, as a person, as an account holder, you can connect your bank account to third-party apps, including apps that are powered by Siri, and you can share your banking data with the likes of Siri, and that is pretty powerful. Imagine that if Siri suddenly has access not just to your contact list and not just to your SMSs that you're kind of sent among your friends, but also has information about you that's related to your financial whereabouts, that is pretty powerful, and that can actually unlock a lot of insights that it can generate. And so once it has that information, the next thing it needs is the data processing. And here again, we have amazing computational power. The devices that we have in our pockets are very, very fast. Also, if that's not fast enough, we can always use infrastructure that is available in the cloud. We can use CPUs, GPUs that Google and Microsoft and AWS have built, which are frankly amazing at just powering through lots and lots of data points. And then finally, once you have the data, you have some analysis. When you're ready to take action, there's also rails through which that action can be made. So let's say if I did want to ask Siri to pay my phone bill, Siri would look into my bank account. Siri can look at all the historic transactions that are made to my phone company, and assuming that's literally that the company hasn't changed and the amount hasn't changed, it can recognize this, and it can take that information and push money to that phone operator. That's kind of nice and dandy in a very sort of in a vacuum, if you will. The challenging part about that, though, is that very seldomly can we operate in vacuum, and this is where things like autopilots they have to have the right circumstances. They have to be trained to see enough cases for them to be reliable. And so the biggest bottleneck for AI assistants to actually be useful is data, access to data. So we have everything else. We have AI assistants that recognize a voice. We have the processing power, and we have the payments rails, but we do not have enough data APIs in the infrastructure. So if, for example, I have a phone bill that changes over time, the ideal scenario for someone like Siri would be to have access to my phone operator's bill API. Because Siri comes off the shelf, it wouldn't, and it would need to be like connected to all the phone operator APIs, meaning that this infrastructure needs to exist, which it actually doesn't today. And that same thing applies to anything else. If we wanted to manage our savings, we have to have savings APIs. For investment APIs, same thing. So with the bottleneck really is the infrastructure, the APIs, the data access points for smart assistants to be able to access so that it can take the data and then process it to fulfill the requests. So to summarize, context is super important. That's probably one of the most important things, and it's also the biggest bottleneck right now. If indeed we would want to use the likes of Siri and other AI assistants to help us improve our financial lives, what is missing is the infrastructure. And so one thing that I can ask for literally everyone in this room is to kind of think about two things. Like, first of all, the first thing we can do is to try and leverage the infrastructure we have at the moment. We have the open banking connectivity. We have loads of other APIs that are built already. All we have to do is start building on top of them. And if you can check your bank balance with Siri off the shelf, what other things can you do? You can start building more complicated applications in the space and just leverage the APIs we have. And the fact that this is only one data set, it's open banking data that's available widely at the moment. It's a limiting data set, but it's limitation creates room for creativity, which is kind of a great place to start with. Second thing is that if you're a developer, there's lots of APIs that are undocumented. There's lots of APIs that are available but no one knows about. So it makes sense for developers to build connectors that connect as a single endpoint to several APIs and aggregate different APIs so that the next generation of developers can build on top of this and use those APIs to train their AI assistants to make them better and to give them more context. And thirdly, for institutions, for enterprises, so when you're building enterprise solutions, you're building interfaces, it makes sense to actually think about building those API first, because the UI is going to change and it's always going to change. And UI can, if you build a great API, you've solved two problems. You solved the ability to work with developers, but also you have like a strong endpoint onto which you can stitch a user interface on top. So for any corporates out there, my big suggestion is that it makes a lot of sense to start building your solutions in a way that they have an API endpoint so that future generations can be able to automate their finances and get closer to more automation in their lives. So yeah, that was just like a quick run through what it would take for us to start automating our finances, what it would take for us to get closer to the stage where we can ask Siri to pay our bills and fill our taxes. The future looks exciting. We just have to continue building it. Thanks a lot. If there's any questions, please, there's plenty of time.
Thank you so much, Rolands. As Rolands mentioned, we do have a couple of minutes for questions, if there are any. Feel free to raise a hand if there's anything you are interested in when it comes to finance or open banking or Nordigen in general. There's a question over there. Wait a sec, there's a mic coming.
Great.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, so with open banking, the banks are mandated to have their open APIs and have them all standardized and regulated. Do you think it will take another regulation for savings platforms and investment platforms and tax, whatever, to actually be open and for others to be able to build on top of that?
Yeah, good question. So what the regulation did was push entities that would not be motivated to move otherwise. So before we had regulation, the banks were not eager to build any APIs. But that's kind of just one way how this can pan out. There's plenty of companies who are building APIs and giving access to those APIs to developers so they can start building. And so not necessarily does there have to be a regulation for entities to move to build those APIs. That being said, the regulation definitely adds a layer of urgency for anyone who exists in the industry. It adds a layer of standardization, which means that whatever APIs that are built, those that are built under some certain framework. But developers are smart cookies. They can figure out even if the APIs look different from different places, as long as they fill the function, as long as you can exchange the data and they work, there not necessarily needs to be a regulation. And so, yeah, I would hope that hopefully, whatever PSD2 is, or like the open banking as a concept is going to serve as an inspiration for other industries to adopt this without a regulation. And so that'd be, perfect if that was possible.
Thanks.
Thanks. Is there another question? Anyone? Raise a hand if there's anything you would like to pick Roland's brain on. There's a question over there.
Hello, Rolands. How are you? Can you please give a few examples of use cases for your company? Because it's interesting where the industry is going.
Sure. So what we do at Nordigen is we're building banking connectivity network. That means that we're allowing developers to plug into Nordigen, and that connection gives them access to thousands of European banks to get access to banking data. So our customers are typically developers, fintechs, financial institutions that need bank data to provide services. Yeah, so where we are today is that the biggest use cases of open banking data in Europe are definitely in the lending space. There's lots of people who struggle to prove their creditworthiness to lending companies because they don't have creditworthiness. They might not have credit history. They might not have might have changed countries along the way. So like lending is pretty big on using open banking data, but like there's other use cases that we see that happening a lot. One thing that is not happening is that we don't see a lot of budget planners, not nearly enough, or things that would help people to automate their personal finances. There's an abundance of tools that are helping businesses to do that, but not enough tools that are helping people to automate their finances. And so that's something that I hope would happen, and there's no reason why it couldn't. There's plenty of opportunity. The market is massive. Open banking is kind of like the total addressable market is 275 million European citizens with bank accounts. And so that's a pretty big market to go after. And so as long as developers keep building, there will be a market that will have demand for these services.
Thank you. Is there another question? We have time for at least one more. You can also validate your idea if you're working on something fintech related. Rolands has a couple of years up his sleeve, so use the opportunity. Anyone? All right. If not, I'm going to say thank you to Rolands. It was a great presentation. Thanks a lot. Let's give it up.